This is The World Cafe. I'm Raina Duras.
You're listening to The World Cafe. Hey, I'm Kalea.
Hey, you're listening to The World Cafe. I'm Talia Schlanger.
David Dye for The World Cafe with a chance.
This is World Cafe. I'm Raina Duras.
David Dye, and yes, this is The World Cafe.
So everything from microphones to DIs for guitars or for keyboards to each individual drum mic. So you make up this long list, every single thing you're going to have in to the mix. And then you run your microphones and cables according to that list.
Today, the Lumineers return with a powerful new album.
Meet Lizzo on our Sense of Place visit to Minneapolis. She was the most talked about new artist we discovered.
My guest today is Hozier. And I think his superpower as an artist is that he can make these giant musical
We have this
moments.
band you have to hear. And so I jump into his car, he pops the CD into the player, and this blares out.
Once the band's warmed up a little bit and you've had them kind of rehearse a few songs in front of you so you can get an idea of whether your levels are correct and how everything's sounding and make sure there's no issues, then you're going to let them know that it's time to record.
WXPN started as a radio station back in 1944, broadcasting on 7:30 a.m. In 1957, it was acquired by the University of Pennsylvania and became a student-run station. After some issues with the FCC, though, in 1975, XPN transitioned to being run by professional staff and find its home on 88.5 FM. And it would be in 1991 when the station manager Mark First took the initiative to create XPN's landmark show, World Cafe.
He was sort of involved in public radio. It was about 33 years ago. You know, at the time, listening to public radio, classical and jazz stations was on the decline. So the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, the CPB, put out a proposal for new programming. WXPN applied for the grant and they got the grant. Very surprisingly got the grant. It was $1 million and it was for 2 years, and that's how the show started.
The show launched on October 14th, 1991 with David Dye as the host. And before long, it became a success. So much so that the station knew they needed to keep it.
After the 2 years were up, we were at a point where we had to decide on whether or not we were going to continue the show. We decided to do that.
And just like the rest of XPN, World Cafe is known for playing almost anything.
We kind of had this weird sort of like singer-songwriter thing happening. We had a little bit of R&B, and we played a fair amount of world music still. You know, I guess over time, you know, after the first 5 years, as AAA started to get more sort of contemporary, less world music influences, our World Cafe programming strategies sort of aligned with WXPN's programming strategies.
When they're deciding between all of these different artists and genres, there is only one quality that they're looking for.
As far as genres of music, you know, we kind of subscribe to there's two kinds of music in the world. There's good and bad music, you know, and it doesn't matter what the genre is.
At World Cafe, we love what we love. It doesn't matter how big it's charting or how not big it's charting. Of course, we look at numbers. We look at all the different things you can look at when we're making decisions on who to book or who to play. But ultimately, those numbers are not the thing that we rely on. It really comes down to, do we like this? Do we think it's good? Do we think it's interesting? And that's really it. If a big, huge artist comes out with something that we're like, we don't feel like this is going to work for us, we're not just going to play it because we have to. And the same goes the other way around. If a band that like no one's ever heard of has a brilliant song, we'll play it.
The reason that World Cafe has such creative freedom when it comes to the music they play is because they're a form of public media.
People tend to assume that when you put the word public in front of media, you mean any media that anyone in the public can see or consume. And the word public and public media in the media industry really means something specific, and it's referring specifically to non-commercial, non-profit media that is committed not to generating income or increasing the value of your shares of stock, but rather in creating media, particularly that serve the needs of local communities in cities just like Philadelphia.
This method of funding allows for public media to have different goals from commercial media when it comes to the show they produce. Therefore, there are a different set of questions that drive their content.
What do people need? What kind of media makes people's lives better? What kind of media strengthens communities, makes a city a more livable place? What kind of media serve the needs of a democracy and help the country to function better? Those are quite different from the kinds of media that provide us with the stuff we enjoy. And there's nothing wrong with the content we enjoy, right? But most media cater to us as consumers as opposed to providing our needs as citizens or engaged members of a community.
This difference in approach gives more independence to the people that create the show.
I get to really, with my producer, whichever producer I'm working with, we write the questions. So it's not like I'm getting a list of questions to ask. It's like, this is what I want to talk about with an artist.
This creative leeway of being a public media entity allows the staff to focus on the correct things and find the real meaning in their work.
Of course, we still know what our ratings are. It's one part of how we measure things, but it's not the most important part. I think that's really good. I don't think that the ratings should be the most important part. If you're just looking at the ratings numbers, you're never going to do anything interesting.
That's the whole reason why I work in public media. Freedom to do whatever we want. I say that a lot. It's like, hey, we can do anything we want. We're a public radio station. We're not constrained by the economic forces. My former boss used to say to me, Bruce, all we need to do is make one more dollar than we spend each year. And there's a lot of truth to that.
Now, as World Cafe approaches its 30th anniversary, they've had to make some adjustments.
Hey, I'm Kaleo from the World Cafe.
The show has moved to being online with virtual interviews and performances because of the COVID pandemic. But, true to their mission, the content hasn't suffered. It just might look a little different, which isn't a bad thing.
I actually think the show's gotten better. Actually, I think the interviews have gotten a lot better. I think Zoom sort of forced the hosts to have more interaction with the artists. And something about the artists being in their home spaces and our hosts being in their home spaces, the conversations changed. The interviews became more conversational. It became more like, here's two people hanging out, talking about stuff, rather than like kind of a Q&A kind of thing.
Opportunities to branch out in new directions for World Cafe, younger, more diverse audiences. Like, I'm a very online person. I don't want the show to just stop on your radio, right? And it doesn't right now. And I want to keep branching that out and out. Grow the podcast. I want more people to hear the podcast. And I really think the sky's the limit, to be honest. But I feel like right now, I'm like, okay, we just need to get back in the office and make sure everybody is not burnt out from a year of pandemic work, because that's the bigger thing too, right? But in reality, we're not a huge team. And I want to make sure our team is like feeling okay before we do all this so that we can do it right.
We'll be back in a moment with more World Cafe.
I'm Raina Duras, back in a moment with more World Cafe.
And we shall return in a moment on the World Cafe.
Thanks for listening to the World Cafe.
Thanks for listening to World Cafe from NPR.